So what I wanted to do is a somewhat of an informal Q&A. I want to make sure that, again, those questions that you guys have get answered. I'll inject a couple questions that I'd love to kind of bring to the table across a lot of these guys. But I'd love to hear from you guys, because you're in the trenches. You're dealing with your networks. You're dealing with your infrastructure. You're dealing with the applications. You're dealing with this transformation that's occurring right now. And so I'm going to open it up first off to see if anybody has any questions. Jim, do you have any? No. Open it up for questions and go ahead.
No pressure.
Yeah, go ahead, Elizabeth.
So one of the questions I have is, obviously, you don't go into this and flip the switch day one. We heard that it takes a while to get to ROI. What happens to the contract that, I give her kind of my spiel, but what happens with contracts that you have for MPLS or other lines that run, 2 years and you're in the midst of that? How do you deal with this?
I'll give this to John just so that yeah. I can answer it, but I'd like to hear it from your end.
I think it depends on where you're at in your contract. If you're 18 months or so, your provider is going to be willing to renegotiate. What they really care about is revenue, and one of the things we did was trade revenue for MPLS for broadband, and that was our success. Revenue migration, yeah. If it's, I don't know, $5 million, that's their number, and if you know that number, then you can be very effective in your negotiations. It's basic, negotiations.
Thanks.
I have an answer also.
Yeah, he does.
So you're gonna have a minimum spend with your MPLS provider, and as long as you hit that minimum spend for the year, you're okay. So when you do a transformation like this, you're not just cutting all of your sites in one day. It's gonna take time to get those disconnects in place, and as long as you get that minimum spend across that 3-year contract, you're gonna be okay. And you can do other things like, a lot of the big vendors for MPLS will resell things like Akamai Access or Palo Alto or other things like that. And if you add those services to that contract, it'll increase your spend while you lower your MPLS costs. So.
Yeah, the other piece, I think you touched on it, it's about revenue. We also renegotiated a contract, so it's not based on a term, so 3 years or 36 months. It was based on a revenue number, so I don't know, 2 million, whatever. So once we hit that $2 million, we're out of the contract, and that was a key piece for us. And I'm sure we held some information back.
Yeah, and to kind of reiterate a little or add a little bit to that is, so I used to work at Verizon and on the wireline side, and so a lot of what I saw customers do, including Columbia, is again negotiating some of that down, whether it's staying with those large telcos, negotiating it so you have an annual value commit, a specific committed number each year, or even a total contract value. So there's two aspects to it. You can either look at it from an annual perspective or that total contract. A lot of times what you want to do is negotiate a total contract, because then you have that capability of, like Colin said, in regards to adding other technologies. So I'll give you an example. We do a lot of business with AT&T, bring a lot of AT&T to customers. And one of the things that we've been helping customers that have large MPLS spend, we've been able to start looking at other technologies, figuring out, they've got a program within AT&T called Network Integration. It's called NI. And they leverage all these different other technologies, including CloudGenix is on NI. You've got Mitel, all these. You've got Equinix is on NI. You've got different types of spends that you can leverage in order to get to that TCV or that total contract value, and then start again dropping down that MPLS. And that's kind of what John had done, because when you go from MPLS to broadband, that's a significant gap. But you got to be careful, because you also don't want you don't want to get hit with I'm drawing a blank now. Yeah, ETFs or anything of that sort.
Yeah. Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, a lot of time Josh and I, when we're working with customers and they do have these large monolithic MPLS networks that are under contract, an easy button is just stemming a node off that MPLS and making it point to Equinix. So that's kind of the crawl, walk, run approach. I mean, if you're tied into a contract, at least you can tie that digital edge back in. It's not the most optimized, but you know, it's an easy button. And then, you know, like I was telling Eric, it's all Lego bricks from there. Once things come off a contract and you want to change a carrier or replace or whatever, you can do that.
What I've kind of been hearing, what we've been hearing today is, and I hope I'm not paraphrasing this wrong, but if you don't have your on-ramp to your SaaS services, you're going to be dead in the water. Like, you got to have Equinix, you got to have CloudGenix, because it's application aware. And I'm not personally experiencing that. Maybe we're overpaying for our internet. We have too much internet. But I'm wondering, have you guys experienced, like, so we have Salesforce, we have Office 365, we have other kind of smaller SaaS services. But I don't feel like, and again, I actually really like CloudGenix, but I don't feel like I need a SaaS-aware SD-WAN.
How does your network team feel?
What's that?
How does your network team feel?
I mean, they agree. Like, we're a nonprofit, so we have to be very careful about where we spend our money. Eric knows this. We're just tightwads, right?
How much video conferencing do you use?
Not a lot. And so that's the thing.
That would explain why you haven't seen a lot of problems.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and it's got to
It's just email and casual surfing.
Well, I mean, we're using Salesforce, email, Teams, but we're not using.
That's still just a basic website.
Yeah.
Uploads, downloads, like bulk transfers, large data files.
Not a lot of that.
Well, then you're not going to get bit by it as bad.
Right. Okay. So is everyone here doing those other things? Am I the only one with my
So,
business just as basic?
One of the pieces we've really leveraged this for is we've used the network to troubleshoot other issues. Okay, and John talked about this a lot, right? Somebody says, hey, my app's not working properly. Network team, tell me what's wrong. And you say, oh, the server looks like it's slow. They don't even know what you're talking about. But if you can say this specific server held that connection for 7 seconds, I don't know what happened behind it. It could be talking to a SQL server or whatever. Sometimes you can even get in and say this query that you're running in a SQL database took 9 seconds to come back. And you can start troubleshooting advanced things like that. And so the network's not the problem, but it helps you find and look and have your team hone in on where the problem actually is, instead of taking 6 days or a month and bringing multiple vendors in and each one saying it's not my problem, it's not my problem, it's not my problem, until you actually can find that thing that guides the team to where they really need to.
It's like the new way when we first deployed voice over IP and it didn't work. But VoIP frequently wasn't the problem. It was something else, and it was the symptoms. We're now dropping these applications onto networks, and their symptoms are being displayed because there's some underlying flaw somewhere else. Is it in the network? Maybe. Is it in the raw compute? Maybe. Is it in how those applications are written to use the raw compute in the network? Maybe. I mean, it's a piece of all of it, and voice taught us a lot about what was coming. And what we're seeing now is the natural outcome of application layer networking taking over. Layers 1 through 3 are presumed to work now. It's all about 4 through 9.
So 4 years ago, we had that problem with voice, with video, with SQL even. Once we got a gig connection and gig connect, like not only for our provider, but internally, that went away. My network team hasn't gotten a call in 2 years saying, hey, the network's slow. Why? We used to get those calls all the time. It took up a ton of time. I don't see
In
a
certain
whole
use
lot of them
cases,
anymore.
bandwidth will solve the problem.
Yeah.
But there comes a point where bandwidth won't solve the problem because it's not about congestion or contention. It's about order. It's about bringing lane lines to the chaos. You know, having a 1,000-lane highway with no lane lines is great, and it works most of the time. But when there's a crash, chaos ensues.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. That's what we're talking about, trying to architect to avoid.
Yeah.
So to add to that a little bit, I've been with my company 5 years now. So when I got there, we were completely MPLS. And then we moved to Velo. And then now we're on the CloudGenix platform. And what I've seen is, to John's point, is the amount of work that we have to do. So myself and 2 other network engineers that are responsible for 160 sites in North America. So if it's an Azure server that's the problem, it may take us 72 hours to figure that out after we've went in circles trying to figure out, is it the network? Well, Velo made it a little bit better, but we still didn't have the visibility to say Microsoft is this server. But with CloudGenix now, something that took me 72 hours 15 to 20 minutes. Now we can say specifically, this is what the problem is. So for us, staff that we have, we've seen tremendous benefit from using something like CloudGenix. Bandwidth is good, but to Josh's point, sometimes that doesn't fix it. And in those situations, you really see how powerful something like CloudGenix is.
Well, and I just wanted to say as well, you mentioned some other companies that are like Salesforce and Workday or whatever the SaaS app. Think about if you can privately interconnect to those and avoid the public internet. So now you're not utilizing your bandwidth to support those applications because that's a private connection.
It also changes your security paradigm, your security stance. If you're taking these things off the internet, you're reducing the vectors that you're exposing yourself to. So as we do these things, we connect to more platforms, the breaches that are happening aren't happening typically inside of a private network unless somebody has really hacked the crap out of it in some way. The breaches are happening over the internet. So they're coming from that vector. Reducing that vector as much as possible is desirable.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, I just asked Colin here, I wanted to mention Umpqua. I thought this was so forward thinking for a financial institution. They deploy in Silicon Valley with me. And the reason they chose Silicon Valley is because that is the main peering point for all the traffic on the West Coast. So them being in that location, there's over 800 partners, carriers, suppliers that they can connect to. So whatever their business model does, if it pivots from a Microsoft to a Google to a Oracle or whatever, it's all accessible just with a cross connect. Did I hit it?
You did.
Okay.
I had a question for John. So John, I think back about 2 years ago, I think was when we first kind of started working together, and we talked a lot today. I love like what the way you're optimizing how you're consuming these things that you're doing now in these virtual environments. I think one of the challenges that we talk a lot about with our customers is around like how do you build the right bridge, right? Build the right bridge to begin to collapse legacy data centers, move these workloads of consequence into an Azure. Maybe unpack a little bit maybe some of the challenges that you had in that journey, but also like how you optimize for that with what we did together.
All right, you're referring to can you give me a little more
Oh
information?
yeah, so I'm thinking around like so a lot of times, when it came to ExpressRoute as an
Yes.
example, so how we, ExpressRoute, I know you've been very familiar with that Microsoft platform for a while, but I think this is one of the, I would say the biggest myths or misunderstandings I would say for customers is like how an ExpressRoute works and also how they differ. So I would say the question is more, how would the bridge that you built, how have you felt that that's optimized what you've done?
I mean, really, if we look at kind of what Columbia Sportswear has evolved to and where it's going, it's focused in on the cloud, and Azure seems to be our center of gravity. We've deployed an Azure Data Lake. We've now obviously Dynamics, and the key piece to that was building that bridge that you mentioned into Azure. We deployed the CloudGenix into that sphere, and really the next piece that we're looking at doing is how do we reduce some of the costs to get traffic in and out? How do we reduce the latency? And the other piece is how do we test applications? Applications now are not centralized, so it's not all about, say, SAP or legacy ERP applications. They're interdependent. They're going out to Dynamics, they're going out to our legacy SAP, they're going out to some integration with a tax program. How do we test when we add a new release on top of that and not break the bank because we have these legacy applications that require super fast storage, and that's very expensive within Azure, and leveraging the ExpressRoute to do that is just another way of helping us, and it also maintains our data as well, so we can maintain our data locally and have it under control and not have to pay the extra fees to Azure. Does that kind of answer your question, I think? Okay, yeah. We're going to talk about DevOps and the cool stuff we're doing as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Aaron?
What questions do you guys have about DevOps and automation? or should I kind of explain a little bit about what we would like to do? So if you look at John's environment, or what John wanted to do, I mean, we have sites that need to be deployed, or sites that need to be managed. So we've got, as John was doing their transformation, and as they were doing the change from the legacy networking into the new networking, one of the things that happened was there was a design, and as that design was going through, they need to convert these locations. So when you convert these locations, there's physical cabling that has to be done. There's configuration work that has to be done on the different products, not just CloudGenix, but also on Palo and other products that Aruba, as he was talking about. One of the things that CloudGenix does as a product, we designed our product to be zero touch. So you can ship these boxes out to a remote location. You can actually configure them while they're in flight and shipping. And then once they get there, they get connected, they suck down their configuration, they automatically come online, and everything comes and works. You can pre-configure them as well if you want to. I mean, it's really kind of the option of how you guys want to deploy it. But one of the key things is being able to have that secure, trusted configuration be able to be done remotely, zero touch, now enables you to start being able to do automation for the rest of your network. So if your network doesn't support that cloud first, doesn't support that remote automation, zero touch, CloudGenix can now bridge connectivity into those other devices, and now you can still program them in that same method, even though they don't natively support it. So we're kind of an on-ramp to enabling you to start getting this automated configuration system into your networks. And what that lets you do is as John was saying, do an Ansible playbook, or do a script that says, okay, I'm going to create site X. Site X is a new store, it's a change. I'm able to pull data from a source of truth, which might be an IPAM system that holds your address information and your store information. It might be a repository using more forward-leaning DevOps like some vendors out there do, where you have now like a code, network as code type repository that has all this info. And the system can just self-instantiate. You can say, I want to migrate site X, Y, and Z tonight, and I run my scripts to modify X, Y, and Z. Everything's in place. And what ends up happening, hopefully, if everything goes well, is that now you're limited by people to plug cables in and move the physical ports. Getting those techs on site is the goal of being the limiting factor. I mean, we don't want the software and the configuration and the expertise that you need to build your network to be what's limiting you. We want to be the hands on the street, the feet out, plugging these things in is be the ultimate limiting factor. So from an automation standpoint, there's some great things that we've done. And
that was borne out when we deployed our stores and moved them over to Dynamics. The automation pieces just worked. It was 60 minutes every time. Sometimes a little bit quicker, but never more than 60 minutes. Where the variable was the tech on site and the quality of tech on site. You would, if you were going to do, I don't know, let's call it 3 sites, you would get an A tech who was awesome and could recable a site in less than an hour. You get a B tech who, an hour and a half. And then you'd get your DNF tech, and that would be a long night. It was never a matter of the software. It was never a matter of the reconfiguration of the network. It just flat out worked based on the automation and some of the things that we did in our POCs and tested out rigorously. Didn't matter what that tech was, operations person, somebody just recently graduated from their CCNE training, or somebody with a CCIE. It every time was the same result. So the other piece we probably should talk about, I think it's the coolest thing, is really Cloud Blades and being able to use the northbound APIs. To me, that is a differentiator that is not talked a lot about out in the industry. The ability to use the controller to pull telemetry, to use the controller to pull, one of the things we're working on right now is something to do with PagerDuty. So we get that information rapidly and are able to troubleshoot quickly. I think that is just totally one of those cool innovation things that we get out of a software-defined solution.
Yeah, that's a good point. So we don't often talk about our cloud-based stuff enough. So
when you touch on that, I'd love if you could touch on the multi-cloud aspect.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, because when Kumar told me about that piece, that was mind-blowing.
Yep. So one of the nice things about our platform, as John pointed out as well, is that our system is orchestrated from our northbound APIs and our controller. So if you look at the CloudGenix fabric, if you look at traditional networking, previously what I like to call your source of truth in a traditional network is all these individual devices that have configurations. So they all have these individual configurations that are maintained and configured and monitored in different locations. With CloudGenix, you now have the central API, central repository in the cloud that you can hit and query and get all the information that you would normally get from connecting to those individual devices. It's a small difference, but it ends up paying huge rewards, because now if you want to do something holistically across your entire network, if I want to integrate with Prisma, for example, I don't have to go out and touch individual devices. I don't have to deal with individual device connectivity. The system automatically, natively has all of that legacy and distribution. So now the system was built with being able to put things out across thousands or hundreds of sites automatically. So we can do these great integrations with middleware that we call Cloud Blades that allows us to hook into, for example, using Palo again as an example, the Prisma integration point, the Prisma API can now be connected directly to the CloudGenix API. And we can do neat things like onboarding security tunnels by just adding a simple tag on our system. And now we start building tunnels across every single site and selectively sending traffic based on our per application policies on every single site. Another one that John mentioned was PagerDuty. So when you have a network the size of Columbia, you're going to have events that happen, just the way it works. You know, these carriers, there's outages, it gets cold, wildfires, whatever you happen, you know, depending on where you live. I mean, exactly. So what happens when these outages happen? Well, we generate events, we generate alarms, we generate information to let help desk people and everyone know what's going on. These circuits went up, these circuits went down, there was a whole bunch of different telemetry. Great, so now that we've got all of this different telemetry coming in, how do you consume it? Well, we have a great API and we can let customers write their own thing, but at the same time, it's nice to have pre-canned integrations that use this intelligent information even more intelligently. So let me give another example, talking about ServiceNow. So we partner with ServiceNow. We actually have a Cloud Blade for ServiceNow as well. And what it will do, when the Cloud Blade comes up and works, it will actually, when it sees events from a site, it will actually open up a case in ServiceNow automatically when there's a connectivity issue. On top of that, it does intelligence to correlate all of these different events that happen. Things like VPNs going up and down between multiple sites, specific applications having problems at that site, and lets it be one ticket instead of hundreds of tickets when you see hundreds of different events. So that type of intelligence, because we've got a holistic view of the entire network, if I'm seeing connectivity problems from site A to site B, you know, and if it was an individual router system, I would get traps from both of those and have to figure out how to correlate it. But because we have this global view of the network, we can simply open up one ticket and say, here are these two different issues. They're related because it's the same site having these same problems. So it's a step above and beyond what you can get with individual discrete systems, because we have this understanding of how everything works together.
I just have one other question, and it kind of speaks to what you were just touching on. It's around, like, so you think about where one of the unique things that enables CloudGenix to be as powerful as you are as a product is the number of APIs you've written, right? So the APIs that we're seeing, you know, we're seeing this happen across the entire industry, but being written between counterparties that you wouldn't necessarily expect, right? So I think, you know, the Prisma rollout that you're leveraging within the platform, I think is really interesting, but I'd kind of love to hear from both of you and others as well, how that API integration is helping maybe with those interdependencies that present challenges.
Yeah. So let me regurgitate back your question to make sure I understand it. So you're saying, kind of talking about how that API integration, the interdependencies of how they actually work together, or the challenges?
Like what it's allowing you to do. I think it's the business outcomes that we're starting to see just be incredible. I mean, I know Josh has seen this firsthand as well, but I'd love to kind of hear what you're seeing in that.
So one of the big things that we are seeing in this is that, you know, customers want to use these different services and they want them to be able to kind of federate and talk together. So, you know, everybody wants to have a single pane of glass. You know, that's the famous phrase. But at the same time, they want to have teams be able to do their own individual functions. So playing more with the Palo Alto and the Prisma, companies build their security policies based on their security vendor, and they have security teams that manage these security policies. So one of the big attractions with Palo that we've had with existing customers is that we have a security team that's already dealing with security policies in Palo. They want to deal with the security side. They don't want to deal with the network side. And then the same thing with the network team. The network team's delivering connectivity. They don't want to deal with the security policy side of it as well. And then network teams trying to build connectivity into different places. You know, they're wanting to enable connectivity, but yet they want the security stuff to be provided as well. They don't want to build network connectivity in a vacuum. They want the security to apply. They just don't want to have to do it. I mean, they want to have somebody else have their access and have the ability to do it. And so these APIs crossing between these types of applications really give that bridge, because you let the security team do what they do best, which is write security policies that meet the need for the applications and the teams. And you let the network teams do what they do best, which is building networks, getting the connectivity, building kind of the underlay fabric, and everybody wins, because now you get all of the information, you get all the configuration side of it. Same thing with cloud providers and when you're trying to get stuff onto cloud. So for example, getting connectivity into the different clouds. Now you're building these APIs to say, okay, I want to connect into a system that has a cloud connectivity, and I want to take the best route. So one of the nice things about CloudGenix is that we can, in our intelligent network system, part of the reason that we built it this way is we want to understand what's performing where and how things are working. So if I have multiple paths to the cloud, one of the things that we'll learn over time is which one of those paths actually perform best for the application. So talking like Equinix, for example, you know, you can bring CloudGenix into the cloud fabric. You can say, okay, I want to send stuff direct. I want to send stuff through Equinix. So now I've got two different paths that we can go, and I can say they're both active. What's going to happen? Well, we'll learn which one's actually performing better. And then as we learn which one's performing better, we'll start sending traffic automatically. So now you get the best of both worlds. So if you want to send stuff direct, if you want to send stuff via Equinix, you can say, okay, I'll let it go either way. And then I can look in my reports and see, oh, Equinix is doing great. They're saving me lots of money, or I'm seeing stuff always go that direction because it's actually faster. And so you can actually see benefits and get information in the system saying, hey, here's how things are working better. Same thing with Palo Alto. We can send stuff. We had customers that had deployed Palo Alto Prisma. They deployed it globally, about 800 sites. And one of the sites they deployed, they set basically a policy for voice. So for Prisma, they were seeing that they wanted voice to probably go direct. They actually wanted the data channel for voice. It wasn't getting a lot of security in Prisma. They were just logging it, which they could do through us. And they were like, let's set the policy to go direct, but let's have it back up through Prisma, or have the ability to go through direct or Prisma. We'll see which one goes better. In almost all sites, the voice went direct, except for Brazil. In Brazil, ends up being it would go through Prisma, and it would be a good 30 to 50 milliseconds faster to go through Prisma than where it was going before. So the nice thing is we gave that option. These API and these integrations let us say, hey, CloudGenix can detect what's going good, what's going well, and we can give you that information back to say, look, this investment that you guys have made in something like Equinix or Palo is actually paying for itself because based on the stuff that's there. So that's a lot of the stuff that we're seeing in the system. So,
and you know what we've seen is data speaks tremendously. Again, the application reports that we're able to provide to our teams, especially on the retail side, gets us that ability to watch the end of the football game instead of taking the call and trying to prove our innocence. So that has been immensely powerful to us, and we're working on that process to be able to give that to our operations team so they don't have to click for it. They run a chat ops command. The other piece that we're dealing with too is we hit situations where we have, let's call it a brownout, where we have a line that isn't hard down. It's experiencing packet loss, and that impacts our ability to transact. So how do we kind of overcome that? In the past, it was involving a network engineer. They did a no shut or a shutdown on a line and shut the line down until the problem went away. We can currently set that to the process of basically invoking a policy through a chat ops command to basically say, all right, application, we need you to go into offline mode. We know it's kind of gray out there or brown out right out there. Here's the policy, invoke this policy, shut it down, and that's from an operations person in a chat ops command. And it shuts down the policy, and we're able to transact. The register moves into offline mode, and it's another way for us to, again, watch the end of the football game.
Appreciate it, guys. If you have any questions around any of the suppliers as well as 3Tree, feel free to ask us questions.